Okay, we are live. That was funny when I do that. All right, get that out of my way. Oh, I forgot to turn off my internal mic. Yeah, my speakers I'm going to turn off. Here we go. Hey guys, we're here. I just made sure I turned off the right microphone and not the wrong one. So that should good. That should be good. Ian says hello and welcome to the live feed. That would be us. Come in and say hi. We're actually having a nice sunny day today. Sundrop says, hey everyone, hi, am I first? You're the first to make a comment besides Ian. Ian says, please feel free to chime in on a magical subject or with an appropriate comment. Julia says, hello everyone, and smiles. Hi Julia, hope you're feeling a lot better. Just a nice day today.
Oh, I never did go get my water and antihistamine.
Okay.
Be right back.
Okay, dokie. Julia says, oh yes, 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 thank you all so much. Good. Ian is going to get his water. We had to get set up before he went back to get the water. So, need the water. Water is good. And I'm glad you're feeling so much better. This is good. I hate it. I hate it when I'm sick. Makes me feel icky. Sundrop says, I have a question when we get more people in. Well, why wait? They can always catch up when they see it later. You don't have to wait for them to show up now. Or you can always ask it later too. You never know. So we all had a summer solstice and a full moon. I hope everybody had a great time doing and being wherever you were. Julia says, I am too. I had to give up on a few projects being so sick for a while, but I take that as a just what is, not a fault or issue otherwise. Yeah, I'm one of those people too. It's like, if it's working, it's great, and if it's not, move on and accept reality for what it is and adapt. So, Sundrop says, have you ever made a poppet doll? If so, did it work? Well, I have a video on how to make a poppet. So, that's a yes. And yes, they work. Depends on what you're making them for. I've done a number of poppets, some for defense and some for healing. Poppets give you something to focus on. Poppets aren't necessarily negative. I've done a lot of healing poppets as well. It represents the person, whoever it is that you're trying to have an effect on. It's not hard to make them. I usually use herbs from my garden for the stuffing, like rosemary and sage. Um, since I grow that and have fair quantity of that for stuffing it, and each one is different, depends on the purpose. No two poppets are alike. Um, I once made one out of clay when I was leaving my ex after he took off and didn't come back and left all of his stuff behind. Since we had been handfasted on Beltane, I really wanted to undo that magical connection that we had made at our wedding ceremony. And so I used a poppet for that, to separate our energy and to keep him from harming me and my family, because he was a bit of a vindictive witch. I found evidence of later. He did a lot of cursing and hexing of people that I didn't know about until I found his diary that he left behind when he left out. So, it helps you to focus and concentrate on the purpose for what you're doing it for. And Julia says, yes, poppets are very diverse, and as Siofra is saying, you can put herbs in it, dress it with a special oil blend, and all sorts of things, putting special stones in too. Yeah, for the healing ones, a lot of times I put in what I consider positive healing stones for the person who needs the energy. And for defense, I often put stones that are like protective against negative kinds of things. But I don't always need stones. Depends on what I'm doing. Al says, hello. Hi, Al. Sundrop says, okay, cool. Some dude says, peace, peace. Hi. Welcome. Yeah, it's a very useful kind of a tool. The original voodoo doll that they helped to promote as a negative thing in movies and stuff like that was initially made to, the pins putting in a doll were to release the negative energy or illness from a person. So even pins and things like that, they had a positive connotation in the original culture, which of course has been morphed into the cursing and stabbing things with needles. And like anything else, it depends on your intention when you're using it and what you're focusing on when you do it. So it certainly could be used for, ill, but not like they do in the movies. Not the same kind of thing at all. Julia says, what I wouldn't do with a poppet is stick it with anything sharp. I mean, that's dark magic anyway, but I have seen advice to put pins, even benevolently intended poppets. Shakes head, no, wide-eyed. Yeah, I think it really depends upon your culture and how you work with energy and so forth. I mean, I think that when a voodoo practitioner was doing it, it was to pierce the protective bubble around the person in order to release the illness. And certainly we do surgeries and cut into people, so sometimes things like that are necessary, but really it's an individual choice. And because of all the negative connotations, I've never found any reason to do that way. I do more passive energetic crystal work and herbs and stuff like that for healing poppets myself. Sundrop says, I heard a story of a witch that made a poppet dolls of her enemies and made them pay dearly. One of them ended up dying. Stories are a dime a dozen. I did have someone once make a poppet of me, my husband at the time, and my son, and she clearly meant to cause us harm. And my son was an infant, a pretty young boy, and my husband were both negatively affected by that, and because of who I am and how I am and so forth, it didn't affect me, which is often the case. Negative spells like that tend to just sort of not get in, but I became aware of it because I saw them, and so then I took steps to stop the person who was doing it, whom I didn't know personally. I never actually met her. She was the sister of a woman that was mad at me for stopping her from having sway over a friend of mine. So yeah, and just because you do one doesn't mean it's going to work. Like we've talked about before, those kinds of things, it depends on your cultural and unconscious biases, things that you've absorbed, what you believe on a deep level where your rational mind may not be able to interfere with the process, which is why we work a lot on ourselves so that we're more aware of that. Sundrop says there's a voodoo doll scene in the Chucky movie. Yeah, well, Chucky was a doll too, so yeah. Some dude says, I've done some research on magic staffs. I ran across a depiction of one which is structured like a human spine and an ankh on top of it. The spine representing stability and the ankh the light and dark.
Yeah, I haven't seen one with an ankh on it, but it's common that in the Indian tradition, the staff almost always indicates the spine. And yeah, the caduceus is a common one for anything dealing with the kundalini and such. The caduceus staff that the medical one that you see actually represents the kundalini and the two serpents up the side, or the two channels, the solar channel and the lunar channel, the Ida and the Pingala. So yeah, staff representing the spine is a really really old symbol that's been used for a lot of years.
Yeah, common interpretation of the staff. Magical staffs are going to depend upon your tradition too. With Ian and I, our staffs were given to us by the universe in various different ways to represent our authority. Some people make their own staffs to represent themselves, and I'm sure that can be a valid method of doing it. If someone gives you a magical staff, however, just be forewarned, you cannot sell it. It's a bad juju move for sure, because a power gift.
If it's a real staff and not just a stick that somebody decided they want to be a staff, that means
right.
If it's charged up, has energy and such.
I met a staff in Santa Cruz at a flea market that was extremely angry with its owner because it was a highly aware magical staff that was given to him by his teacher. And I was wandering around the flea market and I suddenly felt this like energy coming from up ahead that was like, okay, what the heck is going on? Something major is happening here. And so I went up and saw the man standing there in his little, corner. It was like a drive-in theater that they use as a flea market. So he had his little area and he had a staff that I could tell was awake and upset. And I walked up to the guy and I said, are you selling your staff? And he said, yes, I am. I said, you can't do that. And they got very mad at me and yelled at me and told me he could do whatever he wanted. And I thought, yeah, no. You're going to pay a big price for that, because this is like, I can't believe anybody would be stupid enough to do this. Apparently your teacher thought more of you than you deserved. And then later I realized every psychic in town had gone to the flea market and warned him I wasn't the first. And I'm betting I wasn't the last. So, he had the message, he had the information, but I think he chose wrong. But yeah, I mean, when you get some kind of a charged magical item that is gifted to you by a powerful practitioner, you can give it away.
Yeah, there's also other kinds of magical staffs too. I know that there's a type of magical staff that has bells on it that is tapped on the ground in patterns and rhythms called spirits, and yeah, there's all kinds of potential purposes for magical staffs. They're like a wand in the sense that they're usable in all kinds of different realms. Some of them can be have a being put inside them that lives in the staff, so they can be more like a living entity too.
Right. Violet says, hello, Siofra and Ian. I am with you the entire hour and a half. Welcome, Violet.
Hello, Violet.
Sundrop says, Chuck was possessed by a voodoo man doing voodoo on him. Then Chucky did voodoo as the man that taught him. Yeah, but that's a movie, seriously, and not that great of a movie. And I'm not into horror flicks. I ended up accidentally watching that when I was at a hotel once. Seriously, don't get your magical notions from movies, especially horror movies. Do your research. I mean, some of the people that write those movies have a modicum of understanding, but most of them don't, and they're just taking stuff that they've seen elsewhere and promoting it.
Yeah, one of the real, not that this is really, I guess appropriate. I don't know, maybe it is. One of the really interesting movies is called the maid called The Serpent and the Rainbow, which was a little bit fictionalized, but shows a lot of the actual facts of voodoo practitioners, the way they were. I think it was back in the 1940s or 50s when he did that.
No, I think
Right,
it was
the movies,
90s.
The movies newer than that. Well,
No.
it might have been in the 90s. Yeah, a guy
I
by
think
the
so.
name of
Because he was hired to go look for the anesthesia thing.
a guy by the name of Wade Davis went down there looking for the zombie powder, which at that point nobody believed actually existed, but he thought there might be some potential medicinal uses and things, so he went down there and delved into the world of voodoo from the point of view of an outsider and got a good picture of all of the bull that goes on, all of the fakery, and then ended up finding real zombie powder and real zombies, which is a whole story in itself, but it gives a good, interesting point of view of how an outsider went into there. He was a reporter, went in there and discovered the voodoo and went through it. So that has a little more, even though it's kind of fictionalized and it's definitely, what's the word, dramatized?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sort of a docudrama, kind of.
Yeah, kind of like a docudrama kind of thing. It's dramatized a little bit, and they use the little spooky music and stuff. So it's not exactly a documentary, but it is a very interesting perspective on things. I think a lot better, a lot more close to the true perspective than these movies and things you see.
A lot more accurate as far as what the actually meant.
Like I say, it's a little fictionalized, but yeah, it's a lot clearer view than most things give you, unless they're actual documentary on the subject.
So Sundrop says, I guess try and see for yourself. Well, I wouldn't recommend trying to make a Chucky. It seems like it would be a poor thing to do with your time and energy, but to make a puppet to, help somebody or whatever. Julia says Chucky movies are as real about the magic in them as the Beavis and Butthead show was about how teenagers actually act. I like that.
That's probably a pretty good example. Yeah.
Yes, exaggerated in the extreme. Sundrop says that way you'll know, but I love hearing other people's magic stories, good and bad.
Me too, and actually, that's another subject. I have a little video that I'm going to put out with some Zen stories, which are about fun. I think it's about 20 minutes or so, so it's not too long. But I also should do some magical stories, because there's a lot of very interesting magical stories out there. So maybe I'll just collect some of those I've got in books and just tell some of those, because there's some pretty interesting ones there too.
Yeah, I think that'd be great. Toby says, has anyone read the Arbatel? I'm interested in learning more about planetary magic and spirits associated. Is that something you've worked with much before?
I have a copy of it. It's a grimoire like many of the others. I haven't worked with it specifically because I didn't see anything in it that appealed to me more than the others. I mostly stick with Barden stuff, but it is a very interesting grimoire, and you probably have as much luck with it. It seems as legitimate to me as the other grimoires are, which means, there's some legitimacy there. There's probably also some mistakes and things in there, but it is an interesting work for sure.
Yeah. And I do a lot of planetary workings, and I have a personal connection with a lot of the planetary beings since I was little. I've had visitations and stuff like that. I have done some videos on planets and their energy specifically to help people get a start. But certainly, like Ian says, Barden's stuff, he has all the planetary beings and their seals and so forth. So you might find it an adjunct to reading the Arbatel work.
Oh, I was making a mistake. Tell them I just made a mistake.
Ian says he made a mistake. He's got the book now.
Sorry. I was thinking of this book, which is not the Arbatel.
He was thinking of the Grimoire of Armadel. So if this is the book you're talking about, that's
No,
what
that's-
he was talking
That's,
about.
that's what
But
I was talking.
Arbitel is
Yes.
different.
That's what I was talking about. My mistake. I'm sorry.
Yeah,
So
it's
no,
very close.
on second thought, I'm not familiar with that. Apologies.
Some dude says, I have a question. Do you have any tips or tricks on charging objects with energy? We have a couple of different videos on charging objects with energy, and it depends on what kind of energy and what purpose you want it for. I mean, one of the main points of charging an object with energy is first know the energy source you're trying to use, whether it's earth energy or lunar energy or solar energy or personal energy or whatever, and then focus and concentrate that energy into the object and make sure that the object itself is open to receiving that particular kind of energy. You can force any energy on any object, but it's a lot easier if you pick like a stone or something like that that has a natural affinity for the kind of energy you want to put in it or for what the purpose might be. You can draw symbols on it. You can, charge or consecrate it, and before you charge it, and then treat it with respect afterwards. You can wrap it in silk to keep the charge from leaking out, depending on what the object is and what it's for. So, yeah, look through the video archives, and it's probably under basics and a few other categories in the playlists. But if you go to our main page, the community page, and just type in charge an object or charging or something like that, you'll probably come up with a couple of videos we've already covered that subject with. When we can go into more detail, we're not talking about other things.
So the Arbitel is a grimoire, just not the one I was thinking of, and it has some of the, I guess, parts of it were published as like the 6th and 7th books of Moses and such. So, yeah, so it is one, but I'm not so familiar with it myself.
So Al says, I remember my elementary school had girls dress up as their dolls one day. I was the only one who didn't because my mom isn't a seamstress. The poppet thing reminded me of that. Makes me wonder now. Yeah, it's interesting. Sundrop says, oh, no Chucky doll, but the poppet doll, not the Chucky doll. Yeah, well, good. Who would want a Chucky around? He was not a fun guy. Some dude says, I also have another question. What are some basic books which every aspiring magician should own in their library?
Well, that's a tough question. It depends on what kind of magic you aspire to. I mean,
right, and there are so many different kinds. We have several
are you more
bookcases full of books. We've got 2 big bookcases out here and another bookcase in there and then another minor bookcase.
Yeah, what kind of stuff are you, is it like Western Hermetic magic or like shamanic magic or Wiccan magic?
My assumption that it's probably ceremonial Hermetic because he's the one who asked the question about the grimoire of Arbitel.
About the Arbitel, okay.
Yeah. So that would be my assumption.
Well, it's still a tough question.
Yeah.
So since we're both older, speaking for myself, it's hard to say because I'm not so familiar with the newer books and things that are out there. But for Hermetic magic, I definitely have a copy of the Golden Dawn and something like that. I guess I just need more details really. For if you, most people on this channel know I recommend Franz Barden's books, all of them, without reservation, over and above any books on magic, period, any books on that type of magic, unless you cleave to a specific style such as Wicca or Western Hermeticism. Barden's stuff isn't, he was a magician from Czechoslovakia, because everybody's going to yell at me because I use that word, but I'm old, I use some old words, so forget about it.
It was that when he was born.
And, yes. Yeah, it's just a really hard question.
We have some
Well,
source materials for like symbols and imagery, and then spirit
there's like
seals.
Kabbalah stuff, but I wouldn't recommend Kabbalah books for somebody who wasn't interested in that. So it's a little narrower realm. I mean, I could pick some, but they might not strike what the person is interested in. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Violet says, I finally found a Q, LOL. I am doing a ceremony to a fixed star Spica tonight, well known for wealth, success, abundance, and protection. I made a tin box and filled it with so many rocks and so many tiny details that the little tin is packed to the brim. Is it okay that I packed it full? When I go searching for ingredients, I cannot decide, so I include them all. Is it too bad to do too much?
No, but you have to be careful that you don't. You need to stay. If you want something to function, the energies need to be to a certain extent one-pointed. So if you try to put too much into one thing, it would be more effective to do several things specifically and focus on like one thing per each, that type of thing. So just make sure that you don't get different, like if you have two different goals, make it two different things you do, or two different spells, or two different talismans, or whatever. Try to keep at least, you can put as much as you want into it, but make sure it's all oriented towards the same direction, towards the same purpose.
Eve says, hey everyone. Hi, Eve. Sundrop says, there's another witch that shares her spells and has her clients give testimonies. It sounds like serious stuff. As with anything, the spell is not the important part. It's just sort of the outline, like a recipe book. But if you don't have the main ingredient, which is your ability to move energy and to focus and to concentrate and to have a clear purpose, it doesn't matter if you follow it exactly. So,
and you know, as far as people giving testimonies, I mean, yeah, there's stuff out there that works. There are people who can do effective spells and things and actually make them work. You know, genuine Santeria practitioners are really well known for having their stuff work if they're genuine practitioners. And that's saying something, because a lot of people aren't, who you know, do Santeria spells and stuff, may not be genuine practitioners of it in the
well, and the main
sense,
thing is your own personal experience. Getting testimonials from other people that say, wow, I did that and that worked, can be the same kind of validity as going to a faith healer in the middle of a church and somebody suddenly gets up and walks for the first time and it turns out that, you know, they were a plant. So, you know, it's, especially nowadays with so much misinformation and so forth out there, your best bet is to do it yourself and see if it works for you. Not if a million people say that this thing works, doesn't necessarily mean it will work for you, because it's very individualistic what works. I'm a natural skeptic, as you can tell, when it comes to other people's stories, because I wasn't there. I don't know what they're really doing or what they're really going through, and if they're just like, you know, tooting their own horn and it's not real. So, you know, your own experience has got a lot more validity in my book. It can certainly be interesting, though. Violet says, I suggest Agrippa for a library edition, but I'm kind of a newbie and it's not my show. Just a thought.
So thoughts on Agrippa is good. Agrippa is ancient. Agrippa is also full of superstitious nonsense. However, not all of it. Agrippa is difficult. You have to sort out the wheat from the chaff, so to speak. A lot of the things in there that sound like bunk are actually valid, and a lot of the things that sound valid are actually bunk.
It's like everything else.
It takes a lot of sorting. And you also have to watch out in copies of Agrippa. There have been a lot of mistakes in like planetary squares and things, and not in copies and you know, the publishing process and all that. I have found a number of squares that have been reversed and wrong and things like that. So
yeah, because the people who are publishing are not the magicians themselves.
yeah, Agrippa.
They don't know what it is that they're actually putting together, so mistakes wouldn't get noticed by someone who's not actually doing it.
Yeah, and yeah, Agrippa stuff is likely to be misleading unless you're a real scholar on the subject and know, um, especially if you have a background of Barton stuff, then you can have a lot better perspective on what's functional and what's just superstition. Um,
So some dude says I should rephrase my previous question. What are some books which guide the reader on their spiritual growth and evolution and give some basic tools to use in developing their abilities? That's not an easier question.
well, actually, it is because that's Franz Barton right there.
Yeah, well, that would be certainly one group of books.
The basic tools. He gives you the magic tools to develop your um, clairvoyance and magical skills and things. Uh, so he's very good at developing yourself, abilities, skills, and developing yourself spiritually. However, he makes a good point of making the book non-sectarian, non-religious, and not based on any particular symbol system that a person has to know. So, in that sense, it's accessible to everybody, but for me, it doesn't really. There are a lot of practices, but it's not based on spirituality and religious aspects in those sense. So, for me, I need to supply those from another source. But just off the top of my head, that would be probably my best bet by far, unless you're deciding to go again. The spiritual growth and evolution still could use some narrowing down because we have such a background here. For example, one of my methods for spiritual growth and evolution follows Indian teachings and the tantric stuff. So in that case, I might recommend books by Swami Shivananda if what you want to learn is the Kundalini practices and those kind of practices for your spiritual evolution and enlightenment. But if not for the Kundalini, then I wouldn't recommend him. So again, we still need some
Narrowing.
We're on a good start here.
Yeah.
So, but Barton's books over again for your spiritual advancement and stuff too, because his books will get you there. They just don't describe it all or tell you exactly what the goal of it all is. So yeah.
And living in the moment is going to be your best bet, no matter what path you're on.
True.
You're going to learn the most. Sundrop says, I've got a small library of books, but the store I bought them from is so far away I don't go that often.
Yes, we have a big software library that we have that Siofra created for us some years back from.
Oh yeah, from open source materials and stuff like that. And we also bought a couple of CDs that had ancient books and things on them.
Yeah, but we have all of Barton's books and a bunch of lots and lots of other stuff in a software library that we formed and we could download. So you can find most of the stuff you'd be looking for online nowadays. Not all of it. There's a few things I can't get that I don't know are even translated into English. That might,
That's a whole different issue.
that's a whole other issue.
SL says, yay, I made it. Hi, Shifrian. Hi,
Hi.
SL. Welcome. Violet says, that was really neat response to Agrippa I never even thought of. I'm so glad I said I was a newbie appropriately. Well, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, discernment is one of the most necessary skills that you have to acquire
And
if you're going to walk this path.
Agrippa is good because he's one of the genuine ancient ones, and he was one of the genuine, magicians who really went at it. Another one along those lines that's a little bit newer, who derives a lot from Agrippa that is worth investigating for that type of ceremonial magic is also Francis Barrett, Barret. Or ETT, Barrett, 2 T's to 1 T. But he's got a lot of that kind of magic, and it's he's taken a lot of Agrippa's stuff and he's taken it and condensed it down to a more readable and more functional format where if you're looking at Barrett stuff, you can use it more directly without figuring as much stuff, having to pull as much stuff out. He's like combined it, collated a lot of it. A book called The Magus would be the one I'd recommend of his if you like that type of thing, that style.
Howell says, I heard that parasitic entities can attach themselves to a person at their spine, mainly their neck. Is this true?
Well, they can. I don't know about the neck specifically, but
I have
you can
actually,
talk about
I have
those,
seen
yeah.
a few people that have had things attached to them in different energy centers, not just the throat chakra.
Yeah.
If they're attached at the neck, then that means that your ability to communicate is going to be vastly diminished, depending on where they're attached and why they're attached to you and why you can't not attract them or so forth. Your best solution to something like that, of course, is self-development, cleansing yourself, working on yourself, banishing, protecting your energy, becoming more aware of exactly who you are, what is you and what is not, because they can't feed if they find your energy repellent. And so being repellent is, generally speaking, your best thing. I have seen spirits attach themselves to people in bars when they're imbibing alcohol, making themselves more vulnerable to earthbound spirits and entities and things like that. Some of those, though, could easily be thought forms and not actually be a parasitic entity, as in an independent, non-life life form.
But the thought forms can be parasitic, though, larvae.
Right, that's what I'm just talking about.
Yeah, I just thought throw it in. I got to throw it down.
Okay. You can create your own parasite with your own thought forms, and not just physical addictions that will create them as well, the larvae that we talk about from time to time. And those are all self-generated, and when you stop doing the activity that created them, they die and fall off because they have nothing to sustain them. Like I said earlier, your best bet is controlling your own energy and cleansing yourself and being in charge of where your energy goes and what it does. Where it's located is secondary. I don't know that it's always in the same place. I doubt it. I had a client once that was in our circle very briefly, and he was on my table, and I found a black gooey thing in his throat chakra, and I cleared it out because I found it. Then after that, he was more truthful, and we found out what an raging dick he was. And so we got the truth at any rate, because apparently whatever that thing was that I think he stuck there was keeping him from babbling out his true nature. So that was weird. It was sort of like, was that a good thing or not a good thing? Sometimes you don't know. So the best option is the person doing it themselves, because if you're developing the ability to stop larvae and control your thought forms, or not generate negative thought forms so much, then you're not going to have to worry about whether that's a real thing or not, because if it's not real for you, it won't matter, I guess. People always like to try and make this make some kind of a sense. It's kind of like trying to categorize it, and it's always true this way and that way. And the people who experience them are going to come up with their own definitions for what's happening to them. It's subjective. So we try to maintain that level of questioning, discernment, whenever you're looking at a subject. So you don't just accept what someone else has said wholeheartedly, including me or Ian, because, everything is, to a certain point, subjective as far as that goes. Violet says, I just put the magus in my cart. Woot!
Awesome.
SL sounds like a vampire, Owl. SL says, I couldn't sleep during the full moon. The energy felt so active. Does this happen to anyone else? It felt like a vortex or something. It often happens to me. I get very affected by full moon. This full moon, I actually think I mostly slept, so that was a surprise. But it isn't just you. And it's just as you become more sensitive to the energies and stuff and more connected to certain energies, you're going to notice it. Julia says attachments and the reason for them and why some can't either detect them or get rid of them are as varied as the people who are infected by them are. Yes.
Yep.
Absolutely. That's why work on yourself. You are the best person to do that, is yourself. So, and if you have to have someone else do it for you, that means that you might become dependent upon them to keep you fixed. So it's definitely better to learn how to do it yourself. and just, not let it continue. Beth says, "Hi everyone." Hi Beth. Welcome. Now that's one of the joys and one of the frustrations of this path is because it's so incredibly individualistic and there's so many different ways of doing absolutely everything.
Yeah, and maybe that should be mentioned a little bit too, though. Some people are bothered by options, but I love them. But that's the thing about this path. If you look around, there are so many options. Don't let yourself be overwhelmed. But if you don't know what to choose, my advice would be go with one that seems to make the heart happy, that feels right from the heart. And go that way and know that you can always change your path as long as you don't take irrevocable oaths to some esoteric order.
Oh yeah, watch out for those.
But other than that, yes. So,
no irrevocable oaths to any magical orders. In case they turn out to be not what they appear to be.
I have taken some and those turned out okay. I'm happy with them. They're irrevocable, but I've got no problem with keeping those. But yes, be careful if that comes to be the case.
Yeah. So some dude says at SL, "I don't know about you, but I fumbled hard with a woman I met. I've noticed that I run across gold and almost always somehow fumble the bag even though it's in the palm of my hand with a woman I met on the full moon." SL says, "Does the full moon intensify the energy?" Yeah. I mean, think about it. If you just think about it from an energetic point of view, the way Moira described it, I thought was perfect. The sun and the moon are in this constant relationship with each other on an energetic level. It's like the sun and the moon are in love. And when we are between the sun and the moon is full, we're being bathed by that energy going to and from the moon and the sun. And so that's one of the reasons why it's often associated with romance as well as lunacy. So, yeah, it definitely intensifies things. Beth says, "Exactly, always follow your own heart." Yes. Be a good person to the best of your ability. Do you need to? Okay. Anyway, yeah, these are the choices that we make. They determine our path. I remember when I first started consciously choosing my path, I was going through a guided meditation where the past was obvious and the things that had happened to me were well defined, but the future was not. And I looked down at my feet and I saw like thousands of different directions going from my feet in all these different ways. And Moira, my guide, was there. And I said, "How do I know which path to choose?" And her answer was, "Follow your heart." So if you have to pick something to follow, the heart is a better arbiter of what is going to be good for you than about anything else, in my opinion. The rational, logical brain can get you only to a certain point, and then after that, the heart can get you the rest of the way.
You need that to make sure you don't get, too emotional about things, but relying just on that is a big mistake.
Yeah.
Just on the mind, that is.
Yes. Violet says, "You have a new echo. It's not bad, though." Sorry. SL says, "Oh, wow, okay." Don't know why I have an echo. I have all the correct things turned off. Sandra says, "Do you know anything about peppermint oil giving you energy and lavender oil helping you sleep at night?" Well, those are certainly some of their properties. Peppermint oil has been shown in actually some medical studies to assist people with mental function, like before a test, putting a little bit of peppermint oil on themselves and breathing it in helps them to answer certain kinds of questions more accurately. So a lot of students have taken to using that just before they have an exam, and it seems to have a result. Lavender is also very well known for helping people to relax, which helps you to sleep.
Yeah, and I'll add to that there's if you look at that from an elemental point of view, it makes perfect sense. From an elemental point of view, peppermint is cold and airy, and the airy aspect affects your mental, your conscious, your thinking process, your intellect, and if you're like going to do a quiz or something, you might invoke the air into yourself to help with that. And then the watery aspect helps make you calm and at ease, so that you're not all hyper in your own. You don't get in your own way by being nervous about it. So peppermint is absolutely ideal for before tests and things like that. So yeah, looking at plants elementally is a good way to figure out how to use them.
Some dude says rational, sensible decisions, weighing the advantage with the cost, all of them mistakes. Mistakes is how we learn.
Yeah.
If you don't learn from your mistakes, then you're not paying attention. Julia says, at least it's louder. I still have to turn my speakers up to full volume to hear. SL says, that's great advice. Thank you. You're welcome. Sundrup says, do oils expire? I've had mine for a while. If you can still smell it, it may not be as...
They can evaporate and dry, but if they're real oil, they don't. So I know that sometimes the fake ones, the scents, like perfume types, can go rancid after a while. The oils, real oil really doesn't. I'll be right back again. Sorry.
Julia says, yes, oils do have an expiration. Their shelf life can vary. It's easy enough to find online if you need to. Over a year is usually done. Yeah, it depends on whether they're been magically charged or not, too. So they have a magical charge on them, and they're going to be effective for the purpose that you charge them with, regardless of their age. But, you know, in my opinion, I'm still connected to the spirit or the energy of whatever it was that I was doing with that. And then sprays, like alcohol-based sprays, are going to be different, too. When you're looking at taking herbs for medicinal health purposes, then the age of the plant is a lot more important, I think. Julie says we're kept sealed and maybe in a fridge, but not too hot or cold. Yep. I have some that I've had for a long time, and they're still effective enough for the purpose I want them for the scent or the memory. Smell is actually the strongest memory reactivator that you have. So if there's something that you want to remember, associating it with a certain smell can help you remember it. And Julia added, out of light, mustn't forget that. Or in a dark bottle, like a dark blue or amber bottle, which keeps the light from getting into it. There are a lot of oils that are light sensitive.
Yeah, most of the ones I've ever seen that you buy are always in dark bottles.
Right, because of that. Because they don't want that to interfere and activate or deactivate certain compounds that are in it. Okay. We have a small group today. Some dude says, I have a question. What constitutes a good person? The etymology of the word moral means good habits. So what are some traits that a good person embodies? Well, that's a good question because people are going to have different opinions about that. I think balance is probably one of the key factors of being a good person, in the sense that you need to take yourself as part of what needs to be taken care of, not just taking care of others, because that lack of balance, like always doing stuff for other people, if kindness or service or whatever is considered one of the attributes, then you just burn yourself out. So balance is, to me, more important, and not being cruel on purpose. Making mistakes is not a problem, because we all make mistakes. But if you do something to harm someone on purpose, and you enjoy doing it, those would be two things together that would tell me you're not a good person. And if you feel good about yourself, if you can look at yourself sort of objectively and evaluate your abilities, your personality, your instincts, and so forth, and identify things you want to change, you can use ritual and therapy and so forth in order to change it.
So you are having an nasty echo.
I am, huh? So what does echo mean?
Can we look at OBS real quick?
Sure.
That's muted.
Oh,
so.
desktop audio's on.
Yes, I'll let you mute that since I don't know how to do that on your computer. Right, you just mute it there. Just turn it all the way down or click on the speaker and mute it. Alright, now talk some more and I'll see if that helped.
Okay.
We'll see. It probably won't, but.
Somehow that got turned on.
Oh, it did. It sounds better.
Okay, good. Thank you. I didn't see that coming on when we first loaded OBS, so I didn't know it was there. Beth says, I was so thankful for Ian's video explaining Hatha Yoga and the 8 limbs of yoga and mantras. I melted. Ian, you've got the juice.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah, you need to read her message to you on our little group. Yeah.
Yes,
much better. Thank you.
I will do that. Yes, it does sound much better. Thank you for mentioning the echo. We didn't realize it was going on.
Sometimes computers have their own ideas of what to do. Some dude says, I got turned on when you spoke on the decisions we all make in life and the paths we take. It made it sound rather ominous.
Sorry. The echo made it sound ominous.
Oh.
I thought that was funny.
Okay, I didn't get it. Me and my little brain. Okay, gotcha. Me and my little head doesn't always get these things, so brains, the way they work. Yes, I'm very ominous. It's kind of like one of those weird movies. Ooh.
Yep.
All right. Life. But yeah, your path and what you do, every action you take is going to have an imprint on what you think is a good or not good person. Doing the best you can for the circumstances that you find yourself in. I don't think there's a qualitative, thing that says you have to do this many particular deeds in order to be considered good. And I don't think of it as morality. I think of it as personal ethics.
Yeah, well, and it's a hard, these things are all relative. That's the thing to remember. These types of things are all relative. I mean, I'm a better person than I used to be, a lot better. I'm not even close to the good person that I want to be and that I have as my goal and my image of an enlightened being. So I'm still heading that direction. I would consider myself a good person because I don't purposely do anything to try to harm anybody or anything. I think that for myself, that kind of has to be the arbiter, because and as I get older, I find I dislike things I've done in the past because I've changed. And unfortunately, that leads to judging yourself badly, but that I wasn't a bad person. You have to act according to what you know and understand at the moment. So be real careful about,
Don't judge your past person who did not understand or know these things too harshly.
Yeah, exactly.
The past versions of you, which is what happens to a lot of people who are raised in dysfunctional family situations. When they grow up in that kind of environment, when you're a child, you think it's somehow your fault. And then you can carry that with you as an adult, which is one of the reasons why I recommend therapy, because that can help you get through that too. Violet says, the echo went away. Yay. I think it was off and turned itself on weirdly because there was a distinct difference. Anyway, yay. Yay. Some dude says, well, if Homo sapiens sapiens survives to the average biological species lifetime, which is about 1 million years, then the actions we take will impact some 10,000 descendants. Yeah.
Yeah, well, if we survive with climate change and everything else, we'll see.
Well, we'll see.
We can hope.
Well,
I guess we'll survive in some form. Maybe we won't be alive on the earth because we've destroyed the earth, but
we don't know. Just do the best we can with what we've got. Violet says, so nicely said about getting old. They're so nice. Yeah, I mean, if you keep a diary and then you read your diary from 20 years ago, you're like, oh my, I can't believe I ever thought that. What was I thinking? I don't understand. Or even 40 or 50 years, it's like,
And then you
whoa.
can you can take that to help you realize if you're heading the right direction, you know?
Yep.
So I think being a good person means really choosing the best that you know how to choose at the time
Yeah, and for me, how
from
I
where you're
determine
at.
if something I'm doing is a good idea or not, I have a space within me that I can show a planned action to. And then by its response, I can tell whether it's increasing my life force and so it's good, or decreasing it so it's bad. It's like how it would affect me, my spirit, my soul, that inner core that travels through time and is all my different lives. I have access to that. Not sure how I got access to that, but I do. And and that sort of becomes, it gives me that last piece of information, and how my idea, what I'm thinking of doing, makes me feel inside, tells me whether it's good or not good, at least for that moment, to who I am.
Yeah, it's an interesting. I was observing myself one day, my processes internally, and noticed one day to make decisions like that on what to do, though I was not aware of it consciously. Uh, what my brain would do would put up all these different scenarios in my head, this scenario, that scenario, and all these other different options, and then get a emotional response back from them. And then the one that gave me the best response would be the decision I would make. And it was interesting because I had never been aware of that before, and I'm normally not aware of that at all, but I was just observing my processes going on in my head one day, and I realized that's what happens without even thinking of it. And it happens in an instant. My brain throws up, 10 or however many different options, 6 or 8 or whatever, even for little things like what I'm going to eat for dinner, that type of thing. You throw all these options and then choose which one gives you the best response. So it was an interesting observation of my inner processes going on.
Mm-hmm.
Normally, all that happens in a fraction of an instant. You decide, I want this or I want that, but you don't know all these processes have gone on behind the surface.
Well, and I think that that is, as you become more aware of those unconscious decision making tools that you're using, you get more and more control over what they do too. And
Yeah.
that's self awareness is good.
Well, and then you're more aware of, whether you're thinking wrong about things or maybe,
Yeah, exactly.
yeah.
Beth says, I wrote years ago, meditation, connecting with your inner child as you are now and nurture that child. I could go on. It's pretty long. Well, yeah, I did a lot of ritual actually of doing in the beginning, of talking directly to my inner child, externalizing that out. I used my panda bear, Amanda, that my mom finally gave me and replaced Andy, the bear she destroyed when I was a kid. And being able to externalize that outward and make amends in a sense for what happened to me when I was younger, and comfort. I also sometimes do a energetic visualization meditation kind of a thing, not as much now as I used to, where I send who I am now, what I have managed to overcome, and what I have become, sort of back through my life in time, to past selves that I know are going through a really rough patch, and to give them hope. And I remember receiving those when I was at different stages, receiving that. I am optimistic by nature, all evidence to the contrary. Really, the evidence of my life should not make me an optimist, but I always have been. And I think that's why, is that my future self bridged the gap with my earlier self and sort of connected that stream together, because time is just a
Yeah.
construct. We don't have to be
And,
stuck in it.
and that's an interesting concept that I'm sure Gaga Gecko would like
Yeah.
if they were on there today. The idea of, because this occurred to me in the past too. Gaga Gecko ends up with a lot of thoughts that are the same as mine, though my wife thinks they could be a little bit outrageous sometimes, but I've had a lot of those same thoughts. But one of them is, could I make myself really powerful right now by doing some powerful magic and sending it back so it happened to me back in the past and that now I'm real powerful?
Ha! Woo! Yeah.
Yep, that's one of the ones I thought about pretty well. So apologies. I hope Gaga Gecko is not offended by that, but
So Julia says, raises her hand about that, recalling the 20s and so forth, whistles softly, looking innocent. Yeah, we know you weren't innocent. SL says, wow, that's awesome, Siofra. Some dude says, I have a question. Where is the line of abuse considering the sheer potential impact which our abilities can have? That's where personal ethics comes in, and taking personal responsibility for your own actions and thinking about those consequences, because even doing something positive can have a negative outcome, and sometimes negative things have a positive outcome, so we can't always know.
Things that seem negative.
Yeah,
A lot of times it's things that seem negative that aren't really, but they are perceived as negative in the moment because
right.
You don't know the benefits that they might bring in the future.
My best family story of that is my brother. When my brother was like 2, I think, he escaped from the room that my mother had him in. He was an escape artist. He managed to get out of a locked door because the lock was too high. And my mother heard him screaming and took her head out of the oven because she was cleaning the oven, to my brother having a can of Easy Off oven cleaner and his mouth covered with it. And she had to take him to the hospital, and they pumped out his stomach, which is like the wrong approach, but that's what they did. So then a few years later, and I remember this incident, some neighbors moved in down the block, and Mom says, go and meet the new girl. We went there. She had a basement. She took us in. She was showing us all the cool stuff she had. She opened up this purse that was like a carpet, I call it a carpet bag kind of purse. It's a fabric kind of purse. And it was filled with mothballs. And she told us it was candy and offered it to us. And I got a bad feeling. I didn't like it. It smelled bad. Mothballs don't smell good. My brother doesn't have a sense of smell, and any word like candy was something he couldn't resist. And he popped a bunch of them in his mouth and swallowed them, like about 20 or so of these very toxic and deadly poisonous methane mothballs. Then he bit one and it burned his mouth, so he cried. I took him home to my mom. And so we get to my mom. My mom can smell it on his breath. It's just like flowing all over her. She knows what this means. She takes him to the hospital. They pump his stomach, and the doctor is running around the hospital, sort of shaking his head, and he can't understand why my brother isn't dead. And he looked at his medical records and saw the incident with the Easy Off oven cleaner and came to the conclusion that that burned his esophagus and his stomach to the point where he was not able to absorb the mothballs. And it's true, when they pumped his stomach, they came out almost whole. So my mother felt like a horrible mother, that she had failed to protect her child, and yet that failure saved his life a few years later. So that's the thing, is like without distance, time, context, overview, it's difficult to determine whether something is good or bad just in the moment even.
Yeah.
So that's like a real life example. I'm sure there's plenty of others that you can come up with. Jacqueline says, hi, Siofra. Hi, Jacqueline. I was thinking about you this morning. Glad to see you. Some dude says, roads paved with good intentions, which lead to bad places.
Yep.
Beth goes like, oh.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's the thing. You can only make your best decision in the moment that you're making it. And, try.
Yep.
And taking personal responsibility and having personal sense of ethics. It's like, I have used my abilities to stop myself from being mugged and scared an entire gang of people in the process. I don't know if they thought that was good or bad. I thought it was good because I didn't get mugged with my mother in San Francisco on that weird night when we missed the bus. So it's all a matter of perspective. I think I terrified them within an inch of their lives. So yeah, sometimes power helps. Don't mess with me. Hmm?
Yeah.
He's sniffing things in jars. What is this? Oh, okay. That's the mercury stuff.
Yep. Smells good.
Yeah, that's the mercury incense we made, right?
Yep.
For the evocation.
Yep, I like the smell of it.
And it's good. Label your stuff.
Yep.
Because 10 years
Yes,
from
you
now,
won't remember.
10 years from now, if we just looked at that and there wasn't a mercury symbol on the lid, we go like, what the heck is this? And why did we make it? I know we had a reason at the time.
Yes, that happens.
Okay, so Jacqueline says, we need a chat. Lots of medical stuff happening I need to catch you up on. Okay, I'll send you a message and we'll come up with a good time to have a talk. Some dude says, in case of being out of spells, I have some shells. Okay, good. Talk to the ocean with your shells. Listen to the water. I don't know. Shells and spells. We get shells in our garden. The crows bring them and drop them down.
Yeah, mostly all scallop shells. Mostly.
Yeah, mostly I wonder, are the birds, do they have a bad reaction to the toxin that's in the clams?
I don't have a clue.
Yeah. SL says, what did you do to stop the mugger, Siofra? I went full on witch. I turned my back on, there were like 10 or more people, and they were starting to like work themselves up to coming over and get us. We were at the wrong bus stop. And I threw my arms up in the air and I called in the elements and I cast a circle and I called the god and the goddess to come and protect us. And when I was done, I turned around and they had run down the street and they were no longer in sight. And my mother looked at me and said, how did you know to do that? I said, well, someone had to change the energy or we were going to get mugged. And she's like, I know. And we had a housemate with us too. And they're both like, whoa. But I think the reason it worked, not just because we were in San Francisco and all the movies, about witches and how powerful we are, tapped into that. And they were sort of all dressed in black and they had things sticking in their ears and their heads and whatnot. I don't know if they were goth or metal or whatever, but on some level, they believed that this stuff might be real because San Francisco was a hotbed of magic and witches. Starhawk lived there. It was pretty public. And yeah, they just ran and they decided we would not make good victims. And so it worked. And the fact that I wasn't in the least bit afraid of them at that point, when I started, I wasn't worried about what they were doing. I turned my back on them because they didn't matter. And I just did what I needed to do magically to protect me and my mom and my housemate. And that's how it worked. So I think that certainty had a lot to do with it too. They had there was no feedback. My mother and my housemate were giving them what they were looking for, was a fear response. And they were feeding off of that.
Right.
And I stopped it.
Yeah. And Barton gives some examples of formulas that will, such a thing, for example, there's one where if you're charged up with it, any hostile person will immediately feel the superiority of such an individual, their energies, and stay away. So there's one where your aura is just charged up and people naturally stay away.
They're repelled by your energy.
Because they feel like it's superior, things like that. I mean, having that...
Overwhelming, don't want to be by it.
Yeah, so putting out like that confidence, and you can put out that energy, and it can definitely affect other people, especially if you're doing it on purpose if you have especially if you have a good emotional basis underlying it, like I'm scared and I don't want us to all die, for example, or be attacked or mugged or whatever, So yeah, you can definitely put that forth with confidence and stuff. It can be pretty effective.
Well, it worked. I'm still here. And
sometimes some people are so dense that they could have a ton of stuff energetically dumped on them and not even notice, because some people are just so crazy.
Well, they're already so full of garbage. It's just more garbage to the pile.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it worked, and I'm glad that it did. And it was something that just happened in the instant. It was the moment itself that made me do that. It was like it was suddenly there. I knew what to do. The power came over me, and it was done. Um, it's not like I run around town doing that, not trying to terrify the masses or anything. In fact, I try to make my energy as approachable as possible and don't want to be freaking people out unless they need it, like these guys did. Yeah. So Beth says, you did your thing. It's hard to explain to people, but we all do it differently, and we don't even know why we do it differently.
So
some dude said I meant munitions.
Instead of for shells, munitions. See, shells.
Oh, me and my literal brain.
Not seashells. Okay.
Not seashells. Yeah. Okay.
So you made a funny joke. We just didn't get it. I'm sorry.
We're both lame. What can I say?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Luna says, hi, Siofra and Ian and everyone. I'm going back to South Africa tomorrow. I'm with Luna on her phone. I hope everyone is well. Love, Barden. And Luna says, hey, Siofra and Ian, how are you guys? We're doing pretty well.
Yeah.
It's nice and sunny today. It's a beautiful day out. Yeah, so I saw that you were leaving, Jono, and I'm glad that you got to be together for this period of time, and I think it's wonderful that you connected. Beth says it's an instinct when you're threatened. Yeah, I figured it out. Because Luna's not going to South Africa. That's Jono that's going to South Africa. But maybe no one else knew that but me. And I just assumed. Because Luna says, sorry, lack of clarity. First comment was Jono. SL says, oh my God, that is badass, Siofra. Yep, it was pretty badass. I felt pretty badass when I did it. I have to say. But then it was gone. And, every so often I think about that. If something like that happened again, what would I do next time? But so far, I'm good. We have crazy drivers. The other day we were doing errands and we saw someone running a red light at least 3 times, and we only went like a couple of miles from our house and back. It's just like this town, they don't like red lights. They see it turning red and they speed up to get through it after it turns. So
yeah, that's pretty common, I'm afraid, most places.
Yeah.
Yeah.
SL says, I'm going to look that up, Ian. That's really cool about Barden.
Cool.
Yeah, it is. And, they are good books. And the second book, you were talking about doing, stuff with planetary energies. That's the book.
Yeah.
Practical evocation.
Yeah, he goes into a lot of the, his first book is all about magic, but he doesn't go into tools like the wands and things. If you want to know what Barden thinks about magical wands and how to charge them and use them and all that type of information, the actual ritual tools, all of those are detailed in that second book on evocation.
Yeah. SL says, ooh, I've been thinking about planetary magic. I'm going to get that one. Yeah, it's good because then you can find the exact kind of spirit being you want to communicate with.
You don't. If you have that, you don't need a grimoire, really.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
The grimoire might, teach you some of the old styles, which are like, generally speaking, confrontational and aggressive and obnoxious kind of thing. The old way of doing that, threatening the spirit and so forth. And this is not like that at all, because Barden gives you the names of the spirits that are interested in cooperating and find out what their particular field of expertise is. So
and also all the information to do it right.
Yeah.
And not make any guesses about what the real procedure is. But doing it right requires you have a certain amount of clairvoyance.
Yeah. And he says, oh, cool, thank you, Ian. His grimoire or just any other grimoire?
Well, his
book's not really a grimoire.
Well, yeah, but it will, that word will serve the purpose though.
Yeah.
But he lists hundreds and hundreds of spirits, and from there's 72 in the Mercury zone. There's a specific reason for that number of spirits in the Mercury zone. There's like 360 or thereabouts. I'm not sure exactly in the zone girdling the Earth. But yeah, he gives you enough information on each spirit and enough details on which they do that I basically, if I want a spirit to do something or something that I'm working with, I don't bother going to any other grimoires or anything because
it's the all-inclusive source manual.
Yeah, it really is, and the others are only very partial and also very partial in their instructions on how to actually succeed at the evocations and contacting the beings, and Bardenzer lists a lot of them that are as powerful as you can ask for. I mean, he suggests you don't evoke them, but he even lists the death angel of the Earth Zone, the one who deals with that, but he warns you that if you try evoking and dealing with that being and you're not prepared, you will end up being one of the dead people.
Yeah.
But they are as powerful as you could ask for, and without all the risks you might get doing a partial evocation from one of the other books, or one of the other beings that has just a partial or inaccurate description. I found that because of something that came up, I had a necessity to visit one of the demonic spirit beings from the Key of Solomon, and I did so, and I found out definitely that number one, the being was not the type of being in the Christian sense of the term demonic. Okay, that would be incorrect applied to this being, but also that the description in the grimoire was very inadequate. I won't mention the one because I don't want to go into what spirit I talked to and all that, but the description was, while it seemed clear there was some basis of reality to the description, it was so far off that a person trying to do a physical evocation, I visited the spirit being on the mental plane. I did not do an evocation of it, but somebody doing an evocation could have easily accidentally ended up dead by doing it from the old instructions, because the spirit being has some qualities that are listed totally incorrectly in the description.
So Luna says, Jono did some magic this evening, charging up a talisman to aid my local occult shop with sales. He asked me to watch as he worked, and it was amazing to see how his energy body and aura shifted and changed throughout the working. Really interesting to watch. Cool. Yes. And Beth says, Barden is your go-to for almost anything. Well,
yes, yeah. And even as far as that goes, if you end up needing to deal with spirits from the grimoire, and I did in this case because I was having to deal with a situation where somebody else was actively worshiping that demonic spirit, or what's called a demonic spirit in the grimoire. And somebody was worshiping with that spirit, and I wanted to make sure that there was not going to be any problem.
Yeah, the person was crazy and stayed in our house a couple of nights.
Yeah, so that's why I ended up doing it, to make sure there wasn't going to be a problem there. But
mental health is a huge problem.
But yeah, but the thing that I was getting to though is that if you need to do that, Arden's methods are still the way to go, even if you have to deal with a spirit being from another grimoire. If use Barden's methods, you're not going to have a problem if you're up to what he says are the requirements, meaning you have the magical authority and things.
Well, magical authority is kind of a basic that you have to be able to work with spirits.
Yeah,
on any level.
If you're a newbie and you go out there and try and use one of his grimoires and torture the spirit by impaling its sigil on a sword, you're likely to get any kind of result that you don't want.
Asking for trouble.
Yes, highly not recommended.
Yes, and that's not what we mean by magical authority.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a interesting conundrum. But yeah, and you're right, Beth. Barden is definitely a good go-to book.
Sorry, I hope we don't beat that banner too often, but yeah, that's where I'm at. Sorry, that's where I'm at. Really.
Well, it's definitely my main resource book. Yeah. I don't need it most of the time because I'm doing other stuff, but yeah. There was some thought that popped up, but then it also went away, so never mind.
No, we got a few minutes left yet.
So about 10 minutes left.
Be a good time for any other questions. If somebody's lurking out there, feel free to ask a question if you have a question or something.
Yep. SL says, I'm sticking with Barden for sure.
Yeah, well, that's my pathway. I'm working my way through his books. I plan on working my way through as much as I can before I die. I know there are people who can work their way through all 3 books before they die, but it doesn't look like I'm going to be one of them, but I'm working on the process.
It's the journey that matters.
Yep.
Yeah. If you have fun along the way, how far you get is, you know, just how far you get. But
Yep.
Violet says, thanks, you two. Blessed day to you. Thank you, Violet.
Yep.
Some dude says, I have a question. Will we experience a similar society as the people who lived 50,000 years ago, where people intuitively understood all these concepts?
Well, you can get to the point of intuitively understanding them as an individual with work and work in your spirituality and stuff. Be nice. I have my own issues with society, and I have my own thoughts on that, which actually aren't very pleasant. I'm not very fond of our society and such, so I won't go into those. But yeah,
We don't know. It would be nice. It
it
looks
would
like
be
science
nice.
is sort of
Yeah,
heading in that direction,
I certainly would.
incorporating a lot more mystical ideals in their science and stuff like that than
Yeah,
they ever have in the past. So they're coming around full circle.
I certainly would like to be in an enlightened society. I have not run across anything that I on this earth that I would consider to be like an enlightened society you could go live.
Yeah, the people have tried, but
Yeah, in Oregon, Ashland has a lot of good aspects as far as being open to spirituality. A lot of bad aspects too is that now they're starting to attract genuine cults.
yes, and the one cult we just learned about has now fled Ashland because it got too much publicity. So I think it's great. Julia says, to me, the whole threatening of an entity that you want to do something for you has always struck me as the most stupid thing. Imagining you go over to a neighbor and threaten them for a cup of milk. Yeah,
Well, I
same here.
agree,
It just never
and
seemed like the right approach to
exactly,
take.
and it all comes from the Christian thing. And the fact that
Domination.
ceremonial magicians back then were basically Christian oriented, and for a while Christians accepted ceremonial magic because it had aspects that ceremonial magic back then had aspects of Christian religion stuff in it, such as archangels and things. Um, but that's where a large part of that came from. If you weren't dealing with an angel, then you were dealing with a demon. So any spirit being was a demon, and so as such, it was only worth being threatened. And since it was a spirit being and it wasn't an angel, you needed to like threaten those demons and keep them under control and at the point of a sword and all that stuff. And that, yeah, it's a totally wrong attitude towards spirit beings. But that's where all that comes from, mostly, in my opinion.
And then Al says, and there are people have, Julia, there are people have threatened for a cup of milk.
Yeah.
Okay, and some dude says, I believe that soon people will be merging with the internet and AI. Neuralink is well on its way in development. I hope not. I don't think that would be a good idea. Like we talked about earlier, the difference between the mind and the heart. Got to keep the heart in there. Luna says, some dude, I think when Siofra was on that island thing like Atlantis with a different name, that's how they functioned. Everyone was magical and it wasn't a secret. Well, yeah, that was like a time before there was as much physical form. It was sort of an in between physical and spirit. SL says, well, Catholic Mass. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's one of the most magical religious aspects there are, and there's actually some good lessons to be learned from that. The Eucharistic aspect of that is a very potent magical tool, and you can use it well for your own development by taking it outside the Christian framework. And that's one of the things that Martin deals with is use of the Eucharist and charging up your food, and also the air you breathe in the same way for your own, and then taking it into yourself and incorporating that in you as a way to incorporate divine virtues and things into yourself. So highly recommended.
So I had a fun experience in thinking about breathing things in because I was doing yoga and I was practicing breathing in chi um, into my lungs and then spreading it through my body. And for a long time, it was just sort of a mental practice. And then one day, I suddenly felt it as a real thing. And I was very excited and beside myself. And I'm like, oh my, it's real. Oh, wow, it's real. And then I wasn't sure they said it's everywhere, so then I ran through my house and breathed in every room to see if it was true that it was everywhere, and it was.
And it's very interesting. Once you become aware of it, and if you notice, and if you're paying attention, I'll notice that during winter months, especially, indoors will become more or less depleted. And if you open your window and you get that new in, if you become so you can sense the prana, you'll notice that it gets depleted in a room without some external airflow from outside, and it brings in the fresh energy. And you can be aware of that if you know.
SL says, wow, cool, Ian, thank you. And some dude says, so the idea is to make everything ingested by the body energetically charged?
Well, for the Eucharistic approach, yes. And Barton recommends you do it with everything you eat every time.
Well, it makes eating a conscious act.
And then when you eat, you pay attention to what you're eating and the energy in it, and you imagine that energy going into your blood system, being digested, going out through your blood. Your blood is where the akasha is. So because of the akasha in your blood, it spreads throughout your system, and not only affects you physically, but it goes up through your astral matrix and affects your astral body. Then it'll go up through your mental matrix and affects your mental body. So you can affect all the aspects of you, mental, astrally, and physically, by charging up your food before you ingest it. And there's also some other interesting thoughts along there, like if you eat something that somebody has made who's mad at you, I don't know what effect it would have, but you're probably taking in some anger energy with the food and things like that. So can be a whole subject to think about.
Oh, yeah. Al says, sorry, I try to type as fast as my thinking that my fingers skip a word, then I sound like I got the dumb.
Yes, well, I'm way slower than my thinking, so I have to type slowly and deliberately myself.
Me, on the other hand, I'm really super fast.
She's really fast.
I had to talk to our internet provider, and I was doing like the online chat, and it tracks how long it takes, from the time you start to when you end. And I was just like, I pretty much type as fast as I talk.
Like 120 words a minute or something crazy like that. Yeah. I'm closer to like 30 or 40 myself.
But it was entertaining because then I was watching the person I'm talking to type and taking minutes to get a phrase out, and I'm just going and then respond like boop. It was fun. Somewhat. Some dude says I recently started charging the water I use for my plants, and I hope it will make the fruit and vegetables taste better.
Yeah, that's what you're aiming at. And absolutely, charging the water up you use on your plants. Great idea, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
They can grow better, whatever you want to put into it, more resistant against insects or something, depending.
Yeah, you can give them warning messages energetically about, hey, this thing is happening to you right now. This is what you need to do to protect yourself.
Yeah, myself, when I did that, it was just, so far it's been basically to make them grow better. It's been my thing, make plants grow better.
Yeah, Al says, I'm doing this on a cell phone with one finger. Yeah, cell phones are not very good for typing fast. Beth says, I've been diligent as a child until now about opening the windows. It's a dance with everyone in the house. I also put love, light, and high vibration and love for food and liquids. Awesome. Al says, a keyboard would be better. Yeah, keyboards are definitely faster for sure. I wasn't on a phone.
I have a problem with phones myself. I have big, fat, I'm not fat, but my fingers are big. And so they tend to it's really hard to
You get more than one letter at a time, yeah.
Yep.
Better than when you had to pick through the numbers in order to get to the letter that you wanted.
I have a phone with kind of a small screen too. I think mine was made for small Asian ladies with little fingers, about 5'4" tall or something. Or less. Yeah.
So Violet says, heart guys, thank you, Violet. Beth says, I'm a hunting pecker. Yep. So we've come to the end of our show. I guess we have to say goodbye. But as usual, it's been fun and interesting.
Thank you all for being here.
Yep. We don't care how small of a group we get. It's all about the conversation. So thank you, everybody. Some dude says peace. SL says, I used the swipe method on the escorts.
Peace to all you too. I never did get the swipe method down very well.
Al says, have a great day, everyone. Beth says, blessed be. Ian says, blessed be all. It's been great. All right. See y'all next week. Not escorts, geez. Keyboard.
Yeah.
That's hysterical.
That's okay. I knew what you meant.
Yeah. Lulu says, thanks all. Blessings for the week ahead. Julie says, love you all so much as I've been so happy to be here. And the sharing is awesome. As always, Chief Renee, and thank you so much. You're welcome. Alice says, ha ha ha. Yeah.
That should be.
It's funny. Okay.